CDL Practice Test, Illinois, Air Brake, Part 3. Question number 56. Typically, the air compressor should start pumping at about A. 125 C, B. 100 C, C. 150 C. The correct answer here, B. 100 C. Explanation. Typically, the air compressor will start pumping around 100 C and stop at about 125 C. Check the manufacturer's specifications for the exact values. Question number 57. A typical air brake system is fully charged at A. 75 C, B. 150 C, C. 125 C. The correct answer here, C. 125 C. Explanation. A typical air brake system is fully charged at 125 C. Check the manufacturer's specifications for the actual figure for your vehicle. Question number 58. Air tanks must be drained. A. To drain moisture and oil out of the tanks. B. To tell you how much air is in the tanks. C. To drain all the air out of the tanks. The correct answer here, A. To drain moisture and oil out of the tanks. Explanation. Water and oil from the compressor can collect in the air tanks and must be drained daily to prevent brake failure. Question number 59. How do drum brakes primarily differ from disc brakes? A. Drum brakes have one chamber, disc brakes have two or more chambers. B. Drum brakes use an S-cam, disc brakes use a C-clamp. C. Drum brakes use two counter-rotating drums, or one drum is stationary. To apply braking force, disc brakes separate the brake shoes using a disc. D. Drum brakes use an S-cam to separate the brake shoes against the drum. Disc brakes use a caliper to squeeze the brake pads against the disc. The correct answer here, D. Drum brakes use an S-cam to separate the brake shoes against the drum. Disc brakes use a caliper to squeeze the brake pads against the disc. Explanation. Air pressure is used the same way in both braking systems. The standard control valves, relays, and piping work on either system. Drum brakes use air pressure to rotate an S-cam, which causes brake shoes to press against the inside of the drum. Disc brakes use air pressure to squeeze a caliper, which causes brake pads to squeeze against the outside of the disc. A tiny number of older drum brake systems use a wedge to separate the shoes, instead of an S-cam, but the operating principles are the same. Wedge systems are obsolete. Disc brakes are uncommon on trucks, but you should be able to spot a disc system and identify the basic parts. Question number 60. Some air brake systems have an alcohol evaporator. What is the purpose of the alcohol evaporator? A. To help break down harmful substances such as dirt, thus preventing them from entering the air tank. B. To help reduce the risk of built-up sludge in the bottom of the air tank. C. To help evaporate alcohol, which can be harmful to the brake system. D. To help reduce the risk of ice in air brake valves and other parts. The correct answer here, D. To help reduce the risk of ice in air brake valves and other parts. Explanation. The alcohol evaporator puts alcohol into the system. This alcohol helps keep ice from forming in the system, which can cause the brakes to fail. Question number 61. When you press the brake pedal, A. compressed air is released from the air tanks, B. compressed air is released from the brake chambers, C. compressed air enters the brake chambers. The correct answer here, C. compressed air enters the brake chambers. Explanation. Pressing down on the brake pedal lets air into each brake chamber, forcing the brake pads against the inside of the drum, or the rotor for disc brakes. Question number 62. When testing the air leakage rate in a fully charged system, the loss rate with the service brakes fully applied should be no more than C per minute for a single vehicle and C per minute for a combination vehicle. A. 2, 3, B. 3, 2, C. 2, 4, D. 3, 4. The correct answer here, D. 3, 4. Explanation. Applied leakage test. When applying the service brakes with the brake pedal, foot pedal, the loss rate should be no more than 3 C per minute for single vehicles, straight truck, 4 C per minute for a combination of 2 vehicles, tractor and trailer, 6 C per minute for a combination of 3 or more vehicles, doubles and triples. Static leakage test. Without stepping on the service brake pedal, the loss rate should be no more than 2 C per minute for single vehicles, straight truck, 3 C per minute for a combination of 2 vehicles, tractor and trailer, 5 C per minute for a combination of 3 or more vehicles, doubles and triple. Hint, the applied leakage test numbers are more likely to be on your written DMV test than the static leakage test numbers. Warning. If your truck's leakage rate is higher than these numbers, the vehicle should be inspected for air leaks. Question number 63. What can happen if a parking brake is used in very wet weather when temperatures are below freezing? A. The brakes will squeak. B. The brakes may suddenly release by themselves. C. The brakes may explode. D. The brakes may freeze so the vehicle cannot move. The correct answer here, D. The brakes may freeze so the vehicle cannot move. Explanation. If you use the parking brakes when the weather is very wet and the temperature is below freezing, the brakes may become frozen, preventing the vehicle from moving more. Question number 64. To make an emergency stop with the stab braking method, you should A. Pump the brake pedal rapidly and lightly. B. Brake hard until the wheels lock and then release the brakes for as long as the wheels have been locked. C. Depress the brake pedal as hard as you can. Release the brakes when the wheels lock, and apply the brakes again when the wheels start to roll. The correct answer here, C. Depress the brake pedal as hard as you can. Release the brakes when the wheels lock, and apply the brakes again when the wheels start to roll. Explanation. To stop with stab braking, brake hard, release the brakes once the wheels lock, and then brake hard once the wheels start to roll again. Open bracket. Clearly, this method won't work if your vehicle has anti-lock brakes, because the wheels won't lock. Use controlled braking instead. Question number 65. What happens if the air pressure in a system's air tanks falls below 60 C? A. The vehicle will not shift out of gear. B. The front lights will flash. C. The vehicle should stop. D. A warning light will come on. The correct answer here, D. A warning light will come on. Explanation. In an air brake system, a low pressure warning signal should activate if the pressure in the air tanks falls to a level below 60 C. This signal may be in the form of a warning light or a wigwag. Question number 66. What controls the parking brakes in newer vehicles? A. A knob located next to the steering wheel. B. A circular, red labeled switch. C. A spring-loaded lever. D. A diamond-shaped, yellow, push-pull control knob. The correct answer here, D. A diamond-shaped, yellow, push-pull control knob. Explanation. The diamond-shaped, yellow, push-pull control knob is the control for the parking brakes in newer vehicles. It must be pulled out to put the parking brakes on and pushed in to release them. Question number 67. Your vehicle has a dual air brake system. If a low air pressure warning comes on for just one of the two systems, what should you do? A. Reduce your speed and test the remaining system while you're driving. B. Reduce your speed and drive to the nearest garage for repairs. C. Stop and park safely. Continue only after the system has been fixed. The correct answer here, C. Stop and park safely. Continue only after the system has been fixed. Explanation. A dual air brake system has two separate air brake systems, each with its own air tanks, hoses, lines, etc. Typically, one system operates the brakes on the rear axle, S, and the other system operates the brakes on the front axle. If one of the systems loses air pressure, causing the low air pressure warning, either the front or the rear brakes won't work properly. As a result, your vehicle's braking distance will increase. If this happens, stop your vehicle and get the system fixed. Question number 68. Foundation brakes are located, A. At the rear wheels only. B. At the front wheels only. C. At all wheels. The correct answer is here, C. At all wheels. Explanation. Foundation brakes are found at each wheel. The most common type of foundation brake is the S-cam drum brake. Question number 69. What can a leak in the air brake system cause? A. Backup generators to fill the emergency air tanks. B. A loss of pressure in all braking systems. C. The service brake system to retain minimal usability. D. The springs in the spring braking system to apply the brakes. The correct answer is here, D. The springs in the spring braking system to apply the brakes. Explanation. When the air brake system has a leak, the air is let out of the system. This air is what holds the springs back, which means the spring brakes will be applied when the air is released. Question number 70. If the spring brakes are activated, you should never A. Open the hood. B. Release air from the air storage tanks. C. Open the door to the cab. D. Push down the brake pedal. The correct answer is here, D. Push down the brake pedal. Explanation. Never apply the brake pedal if your spring brakes are activated. Brakes can be damaged if they are subject to both springs and air pressure. Question number 71. The emergency brake system uses parts of what brake systems to stop the vehicle in case of a brake system failure? A. The disc brake and parking brake systems. B. The disc brake and emergency brake systems. C. The service brake and emergency brake systems. D. The service brake and parking brake systems. The correct answer here, D. The service brake and parking brake systems. Explanation. If the brakes fail, the emergency brake can use parts of these two systems to assist in stopping the vehicle. Question number 72. If a vehicle has air brakes, the air compressor drive belt should be checked before each drive. The belt should be A. Loosely attached. B. Cracked. C. Frayed. D. Tight. The correct answer here, D. Tight. Explanation. When inspecting an air brake system with a belt-driven air compressor, it is important to check the condition and tightness of the belt. Question number 73. Which of these should not be done during the final step of the basic 7-step inspection procedure? A. Check that the spring brakes come on automatically. B. Check air compressor governor cut-in and cut-out pressures. C. Test low pressure warning signal. D. Check brake drums, or discs, linings, and hoses. The correct answer here, D. Check brake drums, or discs, linings, and hoses. Explanation. Checking the brake drums, or discs, linings, and hoses should be done during step 5, do walk around inspection. Question number 74. Some air brake systems have an alcohol evaporator if you don't keep it filled with alcohol. A. Ice may form on the brake pads and warp them. B. The S-cam may not rotate back when you release the brake pedal. C. The brakes may stop working. The correct answer here, C. The brakes may stop working. Explanation. In cold weather, check the alcohol level in the evaporator daily. Refill the evaporator as needed. The alcohol vapor keeps ice from forming in the lines and valves. Without it, ice could form in the system and stop your brakes from working. Question number 75. To check the slack adjusters on S-cam drum brakes, you should first, A. Park on level ground and drain off the air pressure. B. Park on level ground, chock the wheels, and release the parking brakes. C. Stop on level ground and apply the parking brakes. The correct answer here, B. Park on level ground, chock the wheels, and release the parking brakes. Explanation. Chock the wheels so you can release the parking brakes safely. Then put on gloves and pull hard on each slack adjuster you can reach. If it moves more than about 1 inch, it needs to be adjusted. Question number 76. How do you adjust a manual slack adjuster? A. Turn the adjusting nut either way until there is less than 1 inch of play in the slack adjuster. B. Turn the adjusting nut to move the end of the slack adjuster toward the air chamber until the nut stops turning. Then turn the nut the other way to move the brake shoes away from the inside of the brake drum. C. Turn the adjusting nut to move the end of the slack adjuster away from the air chamber as far as it will go. Then turn the nut the other way to move the brake shoes toward the inside of the brake drum. The correct answer is here, B. Turn the adjusting nut to move the end of the slack adjuster toward the air chamber until the nut stops turning. Then turn the nut the other way to move the brake shoes away from the inside of the brake drum. Explanation. To adjust a manual slack adjuster, turn the adjusting nut to move the end of the slack adjuster toward the air chamber until the nut stops turning. At this point, the brake shoes should be pressing tight against the inside of the brake drum. Then turn the nut the other way a fraction of a turn to move the brake shoes away from the inside of the brake drum. Note, this procedure may not be described in your official state CDL manual. Question number 77. To use the controlled braking method, you should A. Lock your wheels while braking. B. Slightly tap the brakes. C. Apply your brakes as firmly as possible without locking the wheels. The correct answer is here, C. Apply your brakes as firmly as possible without locking the wheels. Explanation. Controlled braking is the method of applying a vehicle's brakes as hard as possible without locking the wheels. A driver should keep steering wheel movements very small if braking while using this method. Question number 78. Why must you study air brakes in the state of Illinois? A. Otherwise, you will only be able to receive a CDL permit. B. Otherwise, you will not be able to get a CDL at all. C. All trucks have air brakes in Illinois. D. Otherwise, you will have to get a CDL with restrictions. The correct answer is here, D. Otherwise, you will have to get a CDL with restrictions. Explanation. In Illinois, if you have not studied and passed the section of the CDL exam on air brakes, you will only be able to get a CDL that restricts you to driving vehicles without air brakes, so good luck. Question number 79. How do brakes work on a long, steep downgrade? A. They work as the main braking mechanism. B. They work as the main braking mechanism with the engine braking effect as an emergency backup. C. They work as a supplement to the braking effect of your engine. D. Not applicable. No braking effect is involved in a downgrade. The correct answer is here, C. They work as a supplement to the braking effect of your engine. Explanation. When you drive down long, steep downgrades, the braking effect of your engine is what's most important, and your brakes are only a supplement to being in the proper low gear. They cannot compensate for your vehicle being in an unsafe high gear without putting too much pressure on your brakes.